Many people, myself included, have been wanting to see it since training camp, and we finally saw it tonight, Evan. CORDARRELLE Patterson.
What did you think?
Lined up, single back form, I form set as the running back. We'll call it mixed results.
I think that's being generous.
But this is the plan now. We wondered if the Patriots are going to bring in a running back after SONY Michel's injury. Would Kenneth Farrow be promoted from the practice squad? Would there be a signing? Would there be a trade? And no, it was an in-house. CORDARRELLE Patterson was the option. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, just overall, your thoughts on Patterson in the backfield?
Well, I think that what we saw here tonight was that it's a gimmick play, right? With him in the backfield, he's not a primary ball carrier. I was really surprised that they did not hand it over to Kenyon Barner here tonight. I really was expecting Kenyon Barner to carry the ball 10 or 15 times here. They obviously don't trust him for whatever reason, and they trust Patterson more at running back. I mean, Julian Edelman and CORDARRELLE Patterson led the team in rushing attempts. You know, those two guys, wide receivers, are gimmick running backs. You know, they're not running backs.
James White's a running back who's essentially a gimmick wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it really hurts them at times that James White isn't a little bit more decisive in the hole, doesn't hit the hole quite as hard as SONY Michel, so he doesn't turn out that 4 or 5 yards per carry because he's kind of dancing a little bit too often. We always see that, and his shiftiness is great in the open field, but it's not so great in a short area, you know, trying to run through the hole. I think what we saw here tonight is, we'll get to it, is that the Patriots really do need SONY Michel.
All right, but Patterson, and we'll get to Michel in a second, but Patterson first. The offensive line was a little banged up without Marcus Cannon. They had Ted Karras in there at times. Patterson hasn't played a lot of running back. So how much can we judge if this is what it's going to be going forward? If this is what we're going to see next week, in 2 weeks, for however long until Michel comes back, how much can we judge Patterson based on this game?
Well, I think it's only fair to give Patterson a little bit of the benefit of the doubt of the offensive line. That's what we did with SONY in Jacksonville and Detroit. We said the blocking wasn't good enough, and tonight the blocking wasn't good enough again, and the Bills' defensive line, Bills' defensive front in general really dominated that matchup, both through the air and on the ground. So, in all fairness to CORDARRELLE Patterson, it wasn't very good up front in terms of the blocking until that one touchdown drive where he broke off a few big runs. So I think if you give him, listen, this is the same thing as him as a receiver, right? If you give him space to operate, then he's going to break off some big runs. You know, he's going to break off some big yards after the catch. He's great in the open field. He gets off to a very good start. He's got great agility and explosiveness, but you got to give him that runway, and tonight they just didn't.
And clearly, though, a step backwards from SONY Michel.
Oh, yeah,
huge
step.
How long can they afford to have him miss time? How long can they afford to go with this option? Again, keeping in mind it's a balance of you want him back, you want that element to your offense. We saw tonight they needed it, but at the same time, you know, this is a guy who's a rookie. Probably you pick him in the first round, long-term plans for him. You don't want him re-injuring his knee, long-term issues. Where's that balance? When do we expect to see him back now that we know what the alternative is?
Well, it sounds like he could be back as soon as next week, but I really don't think that there's any reason to push SONY. I mean, the Patriots are 6-2. The Green Bay Packers, although you're going to need to score to keep up with Aaron Rodgers, their defense isn't that great either, although they played well against the Rams this week. I just think that it's the long-term play here is to rest SONY for as long as he needs. But I think what he proved tonight by not playing was that he's a whole lot more valuable to this team than I think a lot of people thought. I mean, SONY Michel is really, you can tell just by their other options, and even a guy like a Kenyon Barner who can't even get on the field when SONY Michel goes down, that he is a bona fide stud at the running back position. And he's a guy that they're going to lean on significantly in December, January, and hopefully February too. So this team needs SONY Michel. That's just the point in the matter right now, is that whether or not they make a trade, they're not going to get in a running back in here in the next 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever it is, that's going to be better than SONY Michel. They need SONY Michel this season.
Well, there you have it. When would you bring SONY Michel back? What'd you think of CORDARRELLE Patterson as the Patriots running back? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always on Twitter, @PatriotsCLNS. Reporting from New Era Field in Orchard Park, New York, he's Evan Lazar. I'm Alex Barth for CLNS.